right, you get to join me for camera setup and pre-ride prep again this morning. Today, for my friend that's a traffic policeman, I'm going to attempt to follow all the traffic laws properly like I should and behave myself and do all the things the way you're supposed to do it according to the law, so that you can realize just how bad my riding really is when I don't. I guess we gotta take the battery tender off. It was cold last night, so I put her on the tender. This is really quite convenient. The tender port is right here in the dash under this little cover. It's much nicer than having to paw around under a side cover looking for wires and stuff. Go. All right, now we can put the helmet on. Locked. Helmet cam's running. Clap my hands. All right, good morning, YouTube friends. I was asked to discuss the differences between a Harley-Davidson Standard model and a CVO model, and talk about why an Indian is better. So we'll do that once we leave the gas station here in a minute. But as far as an Indian being better, we can all read spec sheets and look at numbers and dyno sheets and hard data that are available everywhere. And, you know, stock numbers versus stock numbers. And you can decide whether or not that makes your Indian or an Indian better than a comparable Harley-Davidson. But that's kind of a subjective question as far as whether or not the Indian is better and why. So I'll give you my opinion after we leave the gas station and discuss the difference between a Roadglide CVO and a Roadglide Standard. But ultimately, whether you think an Indian is better than a Harley-Davidson is kind of up to you. Alright, full tank of gas and we're back on the road. So the differences between a Harley-Davidson Roadglide Standard and a Harley-Davidson Roadglide Limited CVO, the biggest difference is obviously the price, because the Roadglide Standard starts at less than half the price of the CVO. And we're comparing two Roadglides, two factory Harley-Davidson Roadglides. So the difference between other models and other models of CVO may be different, but I'm comparing Roadglides because the Roadglide is what the Challenger and Pursuit were intended to compete against in the market, you know, between Indian and Harley-Davidson. So the Roadglide Standard is an air-cooled Milwaukee 8 engine with a 6-speed transmission and hard saddlebags and fixed fairing, all the Roadglide stuff. Those will come standard with an air-cooled Milwaukee 8, and I believe it's a 107. Should be 107 inch. The CVO will come standard with 117 inch Milwaukee 8 that is twin cooled, which means it's air cooled cylinders with liquid cooled heads. It'll have a tour pack, it'll have hard lower fairings, and all the twin cooled bikes are going to have a hard lower fairing because the radiators for the cooling system are in those hard lower fairings. At least as far as I know, they've all got hard lower fairings. Maybe they're hiding the radiators somewhere else on other models, but I think they're all in the hard lower fairings. Obviously with the CVO you get a fancier paint job. The CVO comes with a rider backrest. The CVO comes with the upgraded, you know, the RDRS, which is Harley's version of Indian Smart Lean. So it's the upgraded anti-lock brakes. The standard CVO, the upgraded anti-lock brakes is an option, but it doesn't come standard with it. Let me think what the other differences are. I think those are all the major ones. It's you know, it comes with anti-lock, you know, better anti-lock brakes or anti-lock brakes. They both have a linked braking system. Fucking wind, man. They both have linked brakes. The Indians do not have linked brakes. But the CVO comes with the upgraded anti-lock brakes. Comes with a bigger engine, nicer paint job, tour pack, liquid cooled cylinder heads, hard lower fairings, and a rider backrest. Versus no tour pack, no rider backrest, no anti-lock, no upgraded anti-lock brakes, no hard lower fairings, and a smaller engine, and no liquid cooling on the smaller engine. So those are the big differences, and the price. The CVO costs a little more than double the base price, or sorry, starts at a little more than double the base price. as far as whether Indian is better and why, I've ridden Streetglide Ultra Limiteds, which are on a well, it's not a Street Glide, it's an Ultra Limited. I've ridden Harley-Davidson Ultra Limiteds, and they're on the Electroglide chassis. And they're nice. They're twin cooled, with hard lower fairings, but they don't have the fixed fairing. The fairing's on the forks. And I've ridden Roadglides, but I haven't ridden a Roadglide CVO. I haven't ridden any brand new 2022 Harley-Davidsons, but I have ridden newer Milwaukee 8 Roadglides and Street Glides and Ultra Limiteds. And you just get a lot more with the Indian. You get better suspension, you get better handling, and stock bike versus stock bike, you get more torque and horsepower with the Indian. And the Indian delivers power differently. The Pursuit and the Challenger. Harley-Davidsons have about 1,000 RPM lower redline, and they make great power up to about 3,800 RPM, and then they kind of fall on their face. They stop making power, it drops right off. And there's another 1,700 RPM or so before they hit redline. Your Indian Power Plus, it makes torque right from go and continues to produce torque until you hit the red line. It doesn't really ever fall on its face. It just continues to pull through the entire RPM range. The Harley-Davidsons, to me, and this is subjective, this is my opinion, they feel top heavy compared to an Indian. It feels like they require more steering effort, and they feel heavy in the bars, and they feel top heavy compared to the Indian. The Indian has a longer wheelbase, so it feels a little more planted on the highway. And I'm 6 feet tall, 6 foot even, and I'm all arms and legs. I have a 34-inch inseam, and I wear a size 11 wide boot. So I've got big feet and long arms and legs. And I feel really cramped on a Harley-Davidson. I feel like I'm a bear on a tricycle or something. My knees are up in my armpits. I mean, it's not that drastic, but they feel small for me. And my Indian Vintage never felt small for me, and this bike does not feel small for me. I'm quite relaxed and comfortable on it. I don't feel cramped at all. And with the longer wheelbase, the Indian feels a little more planted on the highway. But at the same time, it takes far less effort to corner on the Indians, or that's how it feels to me. And then you add the much better suspension that the Indians got. Harley suspension stock feels really mushy and kind of wallowy, but at the same time it bottoms out. It bottoms out real easy. So you feel every bump, and it just feels sloppy and kind of wallowy in the corners compared to an Indian. And then, like, the upgraded Harley suspension just feels like it's hard as a rock. They haven't, Harley-Davidson hasn't really got a really good suspension available. You can go with aftermarket suspensions and they improve it quite a bit. The Olin's and the Legend are both quite good, but those still don't feel quite as good as a stock Indian suspension. The stock suspension on the Indian feels firm and precise, and it doesn't wallow in corners, but it's still, you know, it's still a lot better over bumps and whatnot in the road too. So those are my thoughts. I mean, I'm not saying the Roadglide is not a good bike. They're great bikes. They're just different. They don't, you know, they don't behave the same way the Indian Challenger or Pursuit does. The Harley-Davidsons are definitely a lot easier to work on from a mechanic standpoint. Harleys are about the easiest bikes to work on. I mean, some models are easier than others. It just depends on which Harley it is. But they're still easier to work on than a sport bike, and they're easier to work on than an Indian. Then again, they break a lot more than an Indian. I had my vintage for 3 years, and I think I had like 13,000 miles on it. And the only issues I had with it, let me think if I had, the only issues I had with it was there was a recall for the transmission indicator switch. Told you what gear you were in. So that wasn't even an issue. It was just they had a recall for that, so I went and got it done. And when I rode that bike with my wife on the back on the highway above 70 miles an hour for any amount of time, it would use oil. It would use a lot of oil. But I could ride it by myself at 80, 90 mile an hour all day long and not use a drop. So the extra load of the two of us caused it to use oil. And that never got resolved. I traded it in. But if we were just putting around on back roads, or if we were going on the highway doing 60, 65, it didn't use any oil. It wasn't an issue. It was only when I was really ripping on it and hauling ass down the highway with both of us on it that it would use oil. Which, ultimately, not a big deal. It was just a matter of knowing that so I could keep oil in the saddlebag and add as needed. And I've had zero issues with this one, and I just this minute rolled over 3,000 miles. Harley-Davidsons have a lot of fairly common issues. They have problems in the primary, lots of issues with compensators, lots of issues with primary chain tensioners, lots of issues with transmission main bearings. So they're easier to work on, but they break more too. Ultimately, when I bought my first Indian, I intended to buy a used Harley-Davidson. But after test riding the new Indian versus a used Harley-Davidson, I wanted the Indian. The Indian was more comfortable, I had more leg room, it had so much more power, and it was, even the Indian Vintage, the first Indian I bought, the steering and handling on it was so much better than a Harley-Davidson Road King. And people complain about the handling on the Vintage because it does have slightly longer rake than the other models up until 2020. And I had come from a Honda Fury, so the handling on the Indian was awesome anyway, and I felt like it handled better than the Road King that we road tested. And I definitely had a lot more room on the Indian with my wife on the back than I did on the Road King with my wife on the back. Because when I traded in the Fury, the whole point was to get a bike that was going to be more comfortable to ride two up with my wife on the back. And the Indian was the bike. And that's why we upgraded from the Vintage to this as well. But again, that's kind of a subjective question as to whether the Indian's better than the Harley. I obviously think it is because I bought an Indian. And if you look at spec sheets and all that, the Indian looks a lot better on paper. And it's my opinion that the Indian rides and handles better and is more comfortable. But your opinion may differ. My biggest issue really with Harley-Davidson isn't the bikes, it's the company itself. They've done a lot of dirty, underhanded stuff over the years, and I think the thing that really clinched it for me with the Motor Co. was a big new model reveal a couple years ago, where they gave a bunch of celebrities free motorcycles. And they had a couple non-celebrities present the new models, but they didn't give them a motorcycle. They just got to present it. And the celebrities that got the brand new motorcycles for free, Jason Momoa immediately grabbed a rattle can of black spray paint and spray painted his and just didn't give a shit. And the guy from what's his name, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, was drunk and didn't care, and there was some rap star that didn't care and was talking about how he was going to cut it up and modify it. And Harley thought it was a great success to kind of piss on the working man like that by giving away those bikes to guys that didn't give a shit about them, and only letting a couple of actual working people that were real motorcyclists present them. It didn't give them one. So that really, among many other things, like the way I've been treated at Harley-Davidson dealerships. I've gone into multiple Harley dealerships in various states over the years, and I've only ever been treated with professionalism and respect and politeness at one of them, and that one was inside a mall. I think it was in the Bangor Mall in Maine. All the other Harley dealerships I've been in, I've either been completely ignored or they were straight up rude to me because I didn't ride in on a Harley. So I will not buy a brand new Harley from a Harley dealership, and I will not buy a brand new Harley because fuck the Harley-Davidson Motor Co. and the way they run their shit. But again, that's just my opinion. So there you go. There's my thoughts on all that, and my comparisons between Indian and Harley-Davidson and the Harley Roadglide. Excuse me. My comparison between the Roadglide and the Roadglide CVO. Y'all have a good one.